So at a very high level, these deals are securities, right? They're structured as an LLC. The lead sponsor is selling you an opportunity to buy a portion of that LLC and own units of that LLC. And the SEC regulates these type of transactions and deals. And there's generally Regulation D. 506B is a subset of those rules that says, hey, these are the generally the two types of people that can invest in these type of deals. Regulation D 506B and Regulation D 506C. So thank you for giving us that overview. Since we now sort of set the foundation for the general legal aspect of it, I'm interested in hearing from you from a limited partner standpoint. What are some of the challenges or maybe some of the red flags that you think passive investors should be aware of in getting into a syndication deal? Maybe they're the first time, this is their first time getting into a real estate syndication deal. Is there any guidance, direction, warnings, concerns that you might advise a limited partner to be aware of?
Putting aside, there's probably a handful of questions they should be asking, sort of interviewing and doing due diligence, which we can talk about in a second. The biggest red flag for me is that when you're doing a securities offering, generally speaking, you're going to see a document that's called a PPM, a private placement memorandum. And this is a document that's very important for the passive investors because it's a document that basically outlines and discloses all of the risks associated with this investment and all the disclaimers and conflicts of interest and whatever, all the skeletons in the closet need to be outlined in that document. And what happens, the red flags that I don't do this anymore, but I used to review other people's PPM. The people would call me clients, say, hey, I'm going to invest in this deal. Do you mind reviewing it? And every so often you'll see a deal where there's non-accredited investors, like we talked about earlier, but there's no PPM to be found, or the PPM is very light, or it's a few pages. I mean, this is a very, you've seen them, David, they're complicated, 30, 40, 50, 60 page documents that disclose everything. And so if you don't see that, that's usually a red flag. In fact, the two times that I actually came across deals where they didn't have a document and they gave some random reason for it, so sort of excuses why it's not doing it. But if they're cutting corners on a PPM, which usually means they don't have a securities attorney, so they're not looking for a professional. They're obviously not looking for your best interest, because just backtrack, the whole point of a PPM is to make sure that you as the passive investor can see all the good, see all the bad, and then you can make an intelligent decision as to whether this is a good investment for you, right? And so if you don't have that information, it's detrimental to you as a passive investor, and it's theoretically, if it's got some red flags in it, it's beneficial for a sponsor to not give you a document that's legally required. So I've seen it where literally whatever excuse came up those two times, that inevitably, fast forward 2 years, I would get calls from those investors and say, hey, this ended up being a fraud, or I lost all my money, or all that kind of stuff. And so that's the number one red flag. If you do not see a PPM, doesn't mean it's the end of the world, because there are certain circumstances where one may not be required, but at least that should be, like you said, maybe a red flag or just a yellow flag that says, hey, why isn't there a PPM? Ask for the PPM, see what excuse they give you. And then at that point, I would definitely be checking in with your, if you've got an investment advisor or representative that helps you, or just your attorney to make sure, is this really legit? Because if they're not using a securities attorney, then that would definitely be a red flag, because now you have no idea what information they're giving you and whether they're giving you all the information that's required. Because obviously, as a licensed attorney, I'm required to make sure that all those disclosures are in there. So yes, I represent the lead sponsor, but my job is to make sure the lead sponsor is following securities laws, which is ultimately beneficial to the passive investor.